Indonesian public and some humanitarian groups have condemned Indonesia's decisions to allow Israel to take part in the competition. What's your opinion on this?
I think it's a very simple case. The tournament is organized by FIFA, and therefore there are FIFA rules for that.
How does Israel view countries such as Indonesia? They are pro-Palestinian independence.
I think it's fine. I mean, we don't have anything against people or states to have sympathy to the Palestinians.
Is it possible that the consensus can occur without any party paying harm?
Look, this is a wish. We would like to live in peace. This is why we withdrew from the Gaza Strip.
Halo teman kumparan, selamat datang di To The Point. Kali ini bersama saya, Retian Sekar. Lolosnya Israel dalam ajang Piala Dunia U20 tahun 2023 yang akan digelar di Indonesia menuai respons. Posisi Indonesia yang mengecam kekerasan di Palestina memicu penolakan terhadap hadirnya Israel di Indonesia. Isu keamanan pun muncul sebagai kekhawatiran Israel bagi para atletnya. Sementara itu, Israel menyatakan kesiapannya menjalin diplomasi dengan negara-negara mayoritas Muslim seperti Indonesia dan Arab Saudi. Namun lagi-lagi kekerasan Israel di Palestina mengundang banyak penolakan dari berbagai elemen masyarakat. Bagaimana tanggapan Duta Besar Israel terkait hal ini? Telah bergabung secara virtual Duta Besar Israel untuk Singapura, Sagi Karni. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Okay, so without further ado, let's get to the point. And here's the first question for you regarding the U20 World Cup that will be held in Indonesia in 2023. Indonesian public and some humanitarian groups have condemned Indonesia's decisions to allow Israel to take part in the competition. What's your opinion on this?
I think it's a very simple case. The tournament is organized by FIFA, okay? And therefore, there are FIFA rules for that. And FIFA is setting the rules. And as it's an international body of sport, not politics, it's open to everybody, and every country that wish to host a FIFA tournament has to accept all delegation. It's as simple as that, and I don't think there is anything I can add to that.
Okay, so in light of this decision, Indonesian Ulama Council had asked Indonesian government to reconsider their decision regarding Israel participation in the competition, mainly because Israel has stepped on the human dignity of the Palestinian people for a long time. What's your thoughts on this?
I think I already answered this question. This is a FIFA tournament, and every country who wish to host a FIFA tournament has to abide by the rules and have to accept all delegations. It's not a political conference, it's a football tournament, okay? That's about it.
Okay, so it has to make clear that FIFA make rules and we all have to follow the rules by FIFA. So will the Israeli government provide any social special escort or security detail for the U20 team in Indonesia later?
I don't know anything about that. I mean, the only thing that I know is that the Israeli team was performing very well, got into the final in the European Cup, almost won. Actually, were leading in halftime, and we wish them many more goals and wins in the tournament. Beyond that, logistic, I'm not aware of any of the logistics yet.
But do you think it will be better if Israel coordinate with FIFA or maybe Indonesian government to discuss about the safety and security of the players and maybe the players that will come to Indonesia later?
You don't expect me to answer questions regarding security interview about that, right?
So how will Israel anticipate any rejection from Indonesian?
We anticipate that our team will play well, score many goals, and win as many games as possible. This is our anticipation. I will repeat it a few more times if you wish, that this is a football tournament, and that's about it.
What about the fans and players' families later? Will the government advise them not to come at all to Indonesia?
We don't advise nobody to do or not to do anything with regard to this tournament yet. We'll wait and see. But to be honest, I expect Indonesia being known around the world as a very hospitable country, and the people to be very generous, that they will welcome our players, our team, in a very nice manner. I think this is something that we can anticipate.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, while we are in this rare opportunity, let us also discuss about the relationship between Israel and Indonesia. Despite the seemingly close trade relations valued at economy, we have seen attempts to normalize diplomatic ties between Indonesia and Israel is at a standstill. The possibility of the normalization with Indonesia was first mooted by President Suharto and then President Abdurrahman Wahid during their administration. But until this day, to no avail. How do you see the current relationship between Indonesia and Israel?
Well, I mean, since we started with football, I will continue with football. We feel that the ball is in the Indonesian half of the pitch. Israel has no argument with Indonesia. Our country is very far away geographically. We don't have any argument. We are very open. We issues many tourist and business visa to Indonesians to visit Israel. You must know that before COVID, last year, that we still have full data. There were about 40,000 Indonesians who visited Israel. So this is just to demonstrate two things. One, that we are very open. And secondly, that there are a lot of Indonesians who wish to visit Israel as tourists or as businessmen, and keep coming, and we're very happy about it. When it comes to politics, as I said, I mean, it's Indonesian government decision. It's up to the Indonesian government to make a decision. These are not decisions that can be made by us. I mean, our decision already been made.
So what do you think, what have been the formidable setbacks or obstacles in order to establish relationship between Israel and Indonesia?
Look, I don't want to put myself or be put in a position of a commentator on Indonesian politics. Okay, this is not for me to make assessment or speculations. It's up to your government. They will make their decisions based on their interests. I think it's as simple as that, and it's not for me. It's not for me to analyze publicly the reasons, the obstacles, the impediments, the incentives, etc., etc.
But to your best knowledge, I would also like to confirm, in around 2020, Trump administration was willing to offer Indonesia double investment up to $1 billion, or equivalently to 14.2 trillion rupiah, in exchange for formally recognizing the nation of Israel. Is that true, Mr. Ambassador?
I never seen any document stating or verifying what you just said, so I cannot make a comment on that.
Okay, so you personally have never seen the documents, but have you ever heard about that?
Well, I read some pieces in news, different newspapers, um, indicating something similar to what you just said, but I'm not privy to the details, so I cannot tell you whether it's true, not true, similar, not similar, close to, far away from, etc., etc. I'm sure there will be a lot of people in Israel, and not only in Israel, in other countries, including in Indonesia, that would be very happy if our two countries will be able to normalize relation and develop full diplomatic relations.
So with that offer from United States, you are confirming that it is very possible, and as Israel itself that will be benefit from the offer. What do you think about the offer? Why it has to be United States that make the offer? What do you think?
But you just said something that I didn't say.
All right. Okay.
I didn't agree with what you said. So perhaps I should reply it just to clarify. I said that there will be a lot of people in Israel, in Indonesia, and in other countries that will be very happy to see our two countries normalizing relations. I didn't relate to your previous question because I said I don't know about it. Okay, so no need to make speculations or jumps to conclusions, okay? Because I didn't say anything of that type.
Okay. That is why you are here, and we're happy that we can communicate here to clarify and confirming things. So let's go to the next question. As we know that Israel is not the only country that Indonesia doesn't have a formal ties with. As we know, Indonesia and also Taiwan also maintain commercial ties without diplomatic relationship. And while Turkey still regularly spoken out against Israeli aggressions, it has maintained a good relationship with Israel as well. But my question is, with exchange of trade missions and probably the quote-unquote silent diplomatic ties that have been developed, is that enough to achieve Israel's desirable effects?
Well, there are trade relations, economic relations, because it's more than just trade, going on for decades, as you know, as everybody knows. However, I think that the potential is much larger. Israel is a powerhouse of innovation and technology. Some of your viewers might be surprised to know that Israel has more technology unicorns, meaning companies worth more than $1 billion technology companies. So Israel in the last couple of years has more tech unicorns than all of Europe put together. Okay, this is just to demonstrate the importance of Israel being such a small country, but it's very important in the field of technology innovation. So my point is that we have much to offer, and we trade, I would say, with so many Muslim and Arab countries. In the last 2 years, we normalized relations, diplomatic relations, full diplomatic relations with several Muslim Arab countries, and we trade with them, we exchange views, we exchange technology, we do joint investments, and we do joint R&D. This is just to state a simple fact that there are many countries around the world want to do business with Israel, want to have good relations with Israel, but every country has its own interest, and we respect that, okay? At the time being, Israeli economy is doing very well. Our export is increasing. Our export of technology is more than 50% of our total export. This is just to demonstrate how technology, high tech, is important to our economy, and we are doing very well with very, very low unemployment. We came out of COVID very, very strong. As an ambassador of Israel to Singapore, you talked to me as ambassador of Israel to Singapore, I can tell you that Israeli economy, Israel high-tech ecosystem is very, very attractive to most countries in the world.
Okay, so you hope with all the advantages and the better technology Israel has, it will also advance the relationship between Indonesia and Israel to normalization in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is our wish. Our wish is to normalize relations. But, as I said, you need two for a tango dance. At the time being, we can do business, we can exchange goods and services, and this is fine and this is good. But I think we can do much more for the benefit of two sides. And let me emphasize, it's not only for the benefit of Israel.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, just like what I've said before, this will be a very good opportunity for you to finally speak out about your point of view. So for the first time, maybe after a long years, Israel has never spoken out about itself, about its point of view. Now let me ask you about how does Israel view the conflict between Israel and Palestine?
Well, I don't quite understand what you mean that Israel hasn't spoken. I spoke several times to Indonesian journalists like yourself on a Zoom. Israel is a very open and vibrant democracy with an extreme freedom of speech. Every Indonesian can read Israeli newspapers online, be it Jerusalem Post, Ynet, Haaretz, Time of Israel. So our views are known. Our politicians express themselves elaborately, and therefore I think everyone who is interested to know what's going on in Israel doesn't have to visit Israel, of course, but can read online news from Israel, stemming from Israel, not from third countries, but from Israel in English. There are several newspapers that also published in the English language from Israel. So I think the information is available. And in those lines of communication, you can find not only journalistic interpretation, but you can also see press releases, etc., etc. And I recommend to you and to your colleague and to your viewers, and I understand that you have a very, very large distribution, viewership, so to speak. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, is going to land in Israel in a few hours' time. There will be press conferences with Israeli Prime Minister Lapid, and Israeli views will be heard, and you can watch it, I suppose, on CNN, BBC, Bloomberg, and all the other press outlets around the world. So I think it's our positions are very known.
Okay.
But if you have more specific, questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador. So the next question, the specific question is Indonesia is opposed to the occupation of Palestine by Israel and supports Palestine independence. How does Israel view countries such as Indonesia? They are pro-Palestinian independence.
Okay. Let's start with the facts, okay? And I cannot give in this interview a few hours lectures. I mean, we're not in the university, right? So I'll try to be very, very brief. The history of Israel and the history of the Jewish people in the land of Israel is going back more than 3,000 years. Jerusalem was the capital of the Jewish people when King David made it its capital. He united the two kingdoms, the kingdom of Judea and the kingdom of Israel. Now, you're well aware that this happened more than 1,500 years before Islam came to being, okay? So our history in the land is very, very ancient, and it preceded Christianity, it preceded Islam, and therefore Israel cannot be occupying a land which our kings ruled more than 3,000 years ago, okay? This is, I think, fact number one that unfortunately a lot of people are not aware of. I'm sorry to say so, but a lot of people are not aware of, and this is important to repeat. It's not a history lesson, but it's important to know history. Everybody who reads the Bible knows it, and if you don't remember, you can read the books of the Bible. Secondly, now there is a conflict. There is a political conflict between Israel and the Palestinian people, okay? There have been many attempts to resolve this conflict, and the Israeli government went to a very serious attempts several times in order to try to resolve it. I think the people, the major attempt that people might remember better is the Oslo Accords. The first one was signed in September 1993, and the second one in September 1995. And then, of course, there was the Camp David summit in the summer of 2000. Okay, so this big summit was 22 years ago. Those attempts were not successful for a simple fact. The Palestinian leadership were not willing to compromise at all. And therefore it was impossible to reach an agreement. There have been several other attempts years later by other Israeli government. But what we see now is we see that the Palestinian people are split among themselves. You have the Palestinian Authority, which is ruled by Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, which for the last time had elections in the year of 2006. So since 2006, they didn't hold elections. So one can question the level of democracy there, and one should question who the leadership is representing, because half of the territory and half of the population is in the Gaza Strip, and the Gaza Strip is ruled by the Hamas. And Hamas is a terror organization. It's a terror organization, recognized as a terror organization by many countries around the world. And this is an organization that do not recognize Israel's right to exist. So how should Israel negotiate with an organization, a terror organization, that does not recognize its right to exist? What is the basis, or what could be the parameters of a negotiation like that? So you see, there is simply not a possibility to negotiate with someone who is controlling only half of his people, half of his population, and the other half is ruled by a terror organization, a very, very radical terror organization that does not recognize Israel's right to exist and is not willing to renounce terrorism. Now, Israel demonstrated along the years, let me just add this one point, that we are willing, and we're willing to make serious sacrifices. Israel unilaterally withdrew from the Gaza Strip in order to give the Palestinians a better opportunity to rule their own life, to establish democratic institutions, to develop their economy, to improve human rights among themselves, to better their education, etc., and to develop infrastructures, etc. What happened? And this happened more than 15 years ago. What happened is the Hamas terror organization took over, killed his own brothers of the Palestinian authorities, and established there a terror state. And therefore there's nothing we can do with them. Israel also demonstrated that we are willing to pay a high price, and people should remember that one of our Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, was murdered in 4th of November 1995 because he was very, very adamant and strong in his wish to strive for peace and to move peace efforts forward. So there was a very strong goodwill on our side, but at the moment it's very difficult to see who you can talk to.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it was a little bit of a long answer. I could elaborate more, but I try to keep it as concise as possible.
Okay, so let's go back to my question that you hasn't answered yet regarding the Israel view about regarding countries such as Indonesia that are pro-Palestinian independence. That you just state that your side of histories, but again we talk about the normalization that could possibly happen between Israel and Indonesia. With that in mind, how does you still view Indonesia as a pro-Palestinian countries?
Look, I don't see it's a problem at all, and there are other countries who have full diplomatic relations with Israel and still have sympathy to the Palestinians. I think it's fine. I mean, we don't have anything against people or states to have sympathy to the Palestinians and also to provide them with help and aid. That is fine. We have nothing to object. In fact, in many cases, we even encourage it. You could have it both. You could have sympathy to the Palestinian people. You could help the Palestinian people. And at the same time, you can have normal relations with Israel. The same way that most of the world is acting. Look, I mean, we have a normalization with Arab countries around us, countries that attacked us before, countries that we fought wars with, okay, real wars, with tremendous, horrific sacrifices on both sides. And now we have diplomatic relations, full relations, and good relations, political and economic. Does it mean that they don't have sympathy with the Palestinians? No, they do. They still have their own positions. They still have sympathy to the Palestinian people, and they're still helping them. So here, I don't think there is anything new. Okay.
Okay. So how do you view the peace mission between Israel and Palestine? Is it possible that the consensus can occur without any party being harmed?
Look, this is a wish. We would like to live in peace. This is why we withdrew from the Gaza Strip. But what did we get in return? In return, we got more terrorism, we got rockets, we got missile shot on our cities and villages. This is not something that we are looking forward. We are looking to have good neighborly relations with the Palestinians. They are our neighbors. They will remain our neighbors, and we wish them all the best. We wish to have very good relations with them. But I just described before the severe political obstacles in order to gap the difficulties that we're facing now for several years. I think it's the wish of most Israelis, if not all, to have normal and peaceful relations with our Palestinian friends. Look, I mean, they are our neighbors, but in biblical terms, they are cousins as well. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this is our wish. And we hope, very, very much hope that we'll be able to reach to that point.
So, Mr. Karni, if the normalization between Indonesia and Israel occurred, how important is Indonesia involvement in reaching the consensus?
Yeah, I'm saying Indonesia is a very important country. Okay, it's a huge country. It's a very important country. It's a G20 country, and therefore I'm sure that Indonesia has a lot to contribute.
Okay. So, you still haven't point out your views about the importance of Indonesian involvement in reaching the conflict resolution without any party paying harm.
I think it's very simple. In order for Indonesia to have a deep involvement, Indonesia has to have diplomatic relations with Israel.
Okay.
Without candid exchanges with both sides, I think its ability to influence is somewhat limited.
Okay. Okay, so you are highlighting that it is important to normalize the diplomatic relationship first so that Indonesian involvement will be taken into account.
Look, if two people have a dispute, commercial dispute, okay, and they're looking for a mediator, okay, whatever the dispute is, involving, millions of dollars, and they have to agree on a mediator, okay, I'm not talking about political mediation, I'm talking about commercial. The mediator has to talk to the two sides, right? I mean, if you talk only to one side, you are not a mediator. You have to be friends with both sides if you want people to listen to you.
Several days ago, Muslim people were celebrating Eid al-Adha, and I found that you were also wishing blessing Eid al-Adha for Muslim people. Was that also intended for Palestinian Muslim who are celebrating the same occasion?
Yeah, sure. But now I live in Singapore. But of course, you must know that about 20% of Israeli population is Muslim. Okay, so it's not something which is strange or unfamiliar to us. We have Muslim minority in Israel, a rather large Muslim minority, and they celebrated Eid al-Adha, and of course it's part of our life.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Sagi Karni. Thank you for your time answering our questions. We hope you have a good day.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Ya teman kumparan, demikian perbincangan kami dengan Sagi Karni selaku Duta Besar Israel untuk Singapura. Saksikan berbagai tayangan wawancara eksklusif Kumparan lainnya hanya di website dan juga YouTube Kumparan. Saya Retian Sekar beserta tim yang bertugas pamit undur diri. Terima kasih, jaga kesehatan selalu, dan sampai jumpa.